Hey everybody, it's Jordan with Warpfire Minis, and the Battlescroll just dropped. We've got some changes to the core rules, some army abilities, and to the points, so let's jump into it. So first up, let's start out with the core rule changes, since that's something that impacts everybody. And a couple of the cool ones were they changed the Wizard Finders Battalion. It was already good because it gave you +1 to your tax characteristics for everybody in it if they were attacking a wizard. But now in addition to that, the units in that battalion also get a 5-up spell ignore. So that's going to be awesome for all sorts of elite units, or just any unit you can put in there. If you don't care about going low drops, you might as well put them in Wizard Finders now. We also got a new battle tactic. For all the armies, if you don't bring a wizard, you get one of those Nullstone enhancements. And the new one is you just have to have a hero that's got the enhancement on him. They just have to walk onto and contest an objective that your enemy was controlling at the start of the turn. And that's just a very, very easy battle tactic to do. Because they worded it where you just have to contest it, you don't have to control it. So the enemy can have 100 bodies on an objective, you walk one little hero over there and just touch that objective anywhere on it, and boom, you scored a battle tactic. That's, anytime you can get easy battle tactics, that's great. So in a magic heavy season where the magic guys are benefiting, here's a gimme for all the guys who don't bring wizards. Next up on the mission side, they fixed Power Flex. Now it's a lot easier to keep track of. You score 1 bonus point if you killed a wizard during the battle round instead of at the end of your turns. So you either killed a wizard or you didn't. Then for some core rules things, they changed it to where if you have an ability where you can pick like 3 units per se, and they get different effects, you can no longer choose the same unit more than once. It has to be 3 different units for all of the abilities that do that. So for Death Frenzy, for example, we can't stack multiple stacks of that on the same unit. For the Command Corps doing healing for cities, they can't pick the same unit. Just every ability where you're picking multiple, you have to choose different units now. Another good change they just did is to the abilities where if you have one unit that fights, it can trigger another unit to fight immediately. And what they did is you used to be able to like run a unit outside of 3 inches, fight one unit, and then trigger this unit that ran, even though it's outside of combat and not eligible to fight. Because the wording said fight, you could then pile in that unit and fight with it anyways. And now they changed the wording of it to where the unit that you're fighting with immediately afterwards has to be eligible for combat, which means that it made a charge or it's already in combat. So that takes away a lot of shenanigans there. That's a good one. Next up, they changed how bodyguard units work. Now a bodyguard roll, like to shrug wounds over into another unit, it is now the exact same as a ward roll. And so that means that abilities that make the ward saves worse or negate all ward saves where you can't do them now also apply to bodyguard units. So that's big for like Khorne. They have the sword that can turn off all ward rolls. So now they can just walk up to a Screaming Bell or something like that that can shrug wounds, and now you can't shrug wounds at all because that's considered a ward. Then the last one for the core rules is they made it to where abilities that trigger when you're slain, they just clarified that they don't trigger when you flee from battle shock. So things like Death Frenzy or like the Stormcast blowing themselves up, stuff like that, they're not going to trigger when you run away. Moving into the army abilities, we've got first up is the Cities of Sigmar. The Warforger spell for blazing weapons, they changed it to only affect melee weapons. And that's just a huge blow to all the shooty cities lists, like your block of 20 or 30 Fusiliers doing 6s to hit were mortal wounds is what really sent them over the top. So now people are going to have to re-examine their lists, and it's not a situation where cities is dead by any means. Like the guy who just won LVO, number one, he's a great player, but he didn't have any Fusiliers in the list at all. He was doing mostly melee threats, so there's still play. But for your list that had 20, 40, 60 Fusiliers, like things are about to change up from that one. Staying in order, we got some big changes to Seraphon. On the good side, the Kroxigors got +1 to their wounds, and every unit likes that, but that takes them to 5 wounds each, so now they count as 2 on objectives. And then on the not so good side for Seraphon, the command trait for Starborn, you used to get 2 points every time you cast a spell or unbound a spell with your general. They changed that to once per phase. And that's a really big deal, because now you're just going to get a lot less summoning points per turn. So you may not be able to summon a unit every turn consistently. Then last up for order is the Deepkin, and they changed the sharks. You no longer have 6s to hit explode into another hit. Instead, 6s to hit auto wound. And that, like, the damage drops like by a half a point of damage or something like that, so not a big change. And we're still going to see the spam list of sharks, just the points didn't change, and this one not big enough, so sharks are here to stay. Moving to Chaos, we got the Beast of Chaos, and for them, the big change, and they did this for a few other armies, is they increased the reach or the range of the weapons for Gors and Zangors. So they have a 2-inch reach, so they'll be able to fight in 2 ranks, and that's going to be a big deal for them. Then for Slaves of Darkness, the only change was to the Demon Prince, and they just gave him extra attacks, which I don't know if that's going to send him to where he needs to be, but it definitely helps. For a 150-point hero, you'd want him to do some kind of damage, and now he can. Then for Tzeentch, all they did was they changed the horrors to make them battleline. So you can bring like a unit of blue horrors or unit of brimstone horrors for less points, and it just unlocks a cheaper battleline unit for Tzeentch, which is pretty good. For Khorne, we got a pretty big one. Anytime they cast a spell on a 5-up, it's just unbound. Khorne hates magic. Now it finally makes sense. They used to just ally on wizards to score magical dominance. Now they're not going to do that at all, because a 5-up, like 30% chance you fail your battle tactic, that sucks, nobody's going to do it. Goodbye, wizards. Then last up for Chaos is Maggotkin, and for that one, all they changed was the Sloppity Bilepiper. He used to be able to sing a tune, and you couldn't pile in closer to demon units, and it led to a lot of negative play experiences where people would get locked in combat and just not be able to get out and not be able to attack. So they changed it now to where you're just -1 to hit if you choose to attack the Plaguebearer unit that he picked. And so that's a big change. Bilepiper used to be in every list, or you'd summon him in. Now you likely won't. For Skaven, all we got was they changed Flee. We used to have to retreat a hero and a battle line. Now we can just retreat any 2 units. And that does make it better. It's not a free tactic like some other people get, but we'll take anything we can get. Moving over to Death, we have Night Haunt. And their big buff was just again to the reach. So now the Bladegeist Revenants and the Dreadscythe Harridans, which were like their 2 go-to hammer units, now they have a 2-inch reach so they can attack through each other. So Bladegeist spam, like that's going to be back in a big way. For Soulblight, they changed the Grasping Undead battle tactic. They used to just pick a summonal unit that was within 3. It had to stay within 3 and they scored it. Very easy. Now that same unit has to kill a model and then stay in combat as well. Still very doable, but a little bit harder. Anything they can do to make tactics not just instantly achieved is great. Then the big one for Death was the Bone Reapers, and it was the nerf to Null Myriad that we've all been waiting for. Instead of it being a 2-up spell ignore, we're over to a 4-up spell ignore. The good side of that for them is they no longer have to be in range of a Mortison. It's just board wide all the time. Anytime they get hit with the spell, 4-up, they ignore it. For Destruction, we've got to change to Gargants, and it's just their Roar special Monstrous Rampage that they can do. It used to be just automatically roll 2d6, go over their bravery, and that many models flee. Now they have to roll a dice, and on a 3-up it triggers, but it also shuts off commands like a regular Roar, and they get to do the 2d6, go over the bravery, and then models flee. And for them, making you roll a 3-up is a downside, but now it opens up to where they can do a regular Roar, and then they can do their Monstrous special one to do a second Roar to do to 2 units, which is pretty cool. For Orcs army abilities, the 2 big changes we got were your battle tactics for Big Waaagh, and that was you used to be able to do Sneak Up and the one where the Ironjawz dudes stand in the middle, and now you can only choose one based on who your general is. So if you have a Cruel Boys general, you get Sneak Up. If you got an Ironjawz general, you get the other one where you stand there. And that's a great change. Before you had 5 free battle tactics, now you're going to have to do one of the GHB ones. It's going to be Led of the Maelstrom. It's no big deal. And then the other big change you got was the momentum on the big pigs changed. And now you're only going to lose 1 momentum point at the end of the battle round. So they'll be able to build that momentum and carry it into the next rounds and run in charge and do more damage. So I think we'll start seeing some big pigs in lists. Then finally, we've got the points changes, and I'm not going to read you the whole list. Like, you can go look at the Battlescroll yourself and see them. So I'm going to pick out a couple of the ones that I think are impactful. So starting out, we'll go with Cities of Sigmar. And for them, their 2 big ones were Talia went down 40 points, and that will help her compete with the Griffin. Like, you normally have room for 1 big monster in your list. Right now, you always went with the Griffin just for the points cost. So now with her down 40, she's something that you'll actually look at now. And then the Command Core, they went up 30 points. And I was kind of hoping that they would make it to where you couldn't stack multiple command core units to do all of their abilities twice. But with the change to where you pick the 3 units, they all have to be different ones, that helps. And with the 30-point increase, we may see less of people bringing 2 of them. Then next up is Fire Slayers, and they just saw points drops kind of across the board, which is good for them, and they also got an extra inch of reach for the Volkites, so that'll help them, give them a little more variety in their list building. Speaking of dwarves, for KO, they got points hikes on almost everything, so thumbs up GW. The Ironclad is the only thing that went down 20 points, but like Thunders and all the little heroes, pretty much everything else went up 10, so that'll help hopefully bring them down a notch. For Deepkin, Eels went down 10, and the Sharks, that's the big change, is that the Sharks didn't change. I don't know why, but Shark spam, just keep doing that. For Lumineth, Teclis went down some points, and the Sentinels went down some points. That's good news for Lumineth. For Seraphon, we saw some big points changes. So like Croak, the Ashleth Bearer, the Slann, the Starseer, all of your staple Starborn units went up points and went up a lot of points. So like Croak went up 30, so life's going to be tougher there. But again, on the Coalesce side, we got that extra wound to the Croxagors, and like Stegodons are down 20, the Carnosaurs are down. So I think we're going to see a pretty big shift away from Starborn over to Coalesced going forward. For Stormcast, the big dragons went down 20 points for Krondus and Karazai, and then the Questor Soulsworn went down 20 as well. And that's when we've seen some people ally those guys in, because they get that once per game teleport. It's a lot of bodies on the objective. So with that one coming down, we might see that in a couple other places. And then one big one for Order was Sylvaneth. The Warsong went down 30 points. And so that's a model that's in almost every list. And a lot of times when you were list building, you found yourself needing those 10 or 20 points to sneak something else in there. And so the drop there is really going to help them out with their list building. And then on the good news tip, Drika and Alario, they both went down 20 points too. For Chaos, the only points change that really stuck out to me was that the Rotmire Creed went down 10. I don't know why. Rotmire are great, but down another 10. Sweet. For the death side of things, I forgot about the rats. For us, there were a lot of point changes, but kind of confusing ones. So like the Warbringer went down 20 points, and like that's a model that's in almost every list. But they did get a couple things right, like PCBs went up 10, the Screaming Bell went up. They're trying to make those a little bit less spammy. But we got drops on like Master Molder, Rat Ogres, the Warp Lightning Cannons, the Warlock Engineers, and a pretty big drop on Thankwall. So there's some play. We'll have to look around at the lists and tinker with things. Like you might be able to fit in a triple Vermin Lord list now, or 2 Vermin Lords and Thankwall and a bunch of cannons. There's a little bit of play. We got to see what we can do. For the death side of things, the 2 standouts were OBR and Soulblight. And OBR, just Immortus Guard and Morghast, they went up 10 points each. I don't think that that's going to stop us from seeing 8 Morghast flying around. So we'll see what impact it makes. Then over for Soulblight, the Blood Knights and Vordry both went down a good number of points. And that'll help the Castelli players. Like maybe you can sneak some more of those in there. But on the other side, like Felbats went up 10. So not huge sweeping changes for them, but it would be cool to see some Castelli lists around. Then for points changes for Destruction, we've got the Orcs, and you just saw points drops everywhere. Like our boys went down 20, Big Pigs went down like 30, even the Gnashatooth went down. Like that guy, he was already a great deal, so getting even cheaper. If he was in any other army, we'd see a lot of them, but Big Wall, you guys are sitting pretty. Then the last notable one for Destruction was for Ogre Maw Tribes. The Leadbenchers went down 10, but the Mournfang went down 20. And I already liked Mournfang, so at 20 points cheaper, like, let's do it, man. Bring a squad of 2 or a squad of 4 and cruise them around. So now that we've laid that all out, kind of my overall take on the Battlescroll is they did a good job on, like, Null Myriad going to a 4-up. That's great. Khorne not being good at magic, like the 5-up unbinding yourself. Great, cool move. But I was kind of hoping for more. And with this season being a year long, I was hoping we're at that 6-month mark now where they were going to do something to shake it up and make the season feel a lot different. And then on top of that, using the points or changing abilities to try and discourage some of the spam lists. And they did it in some cases. So like Steam Tanks went up 20 points. And so we won't see, or it'll be harder to see the big Steam Tank spam lists. But like Sharks are still around. And with the changes they made to Gores, like a bunch of Gores and All Herd, that's going to be a thing. And it would have been nice to see like a rule if they did like a rule of 3 for us. And maybe that's something they're saving for 4th edition where we can only bring 3 of the same unit to discourage those spam abilities. Then we got things like Blizzard has been a pretty negative play experience from almost everybody I talk to. The ability for one little wizard to do 46 mortal wounds and take out your big hammer unit in one spell, it just feels bad. And I was hoping that they were going to change that to maybe do 2d6 or make it some d3s or make the negative impact of it bigger to try and discourage people from casting it all the time. But for the most part, we kind of just stayed the course. We got some small points changes like Night Haunt and those guys that got the extra reach, like they'll see a little bump up. But most of our big hitting armies, they're going to be sticking around and we're kind of just in for more of the same. But we'll see how things go. The best thing that we can all do is just play a bunch of games, see how things shake out. I know for my Skaven list, the points stayed the same. There were some decreases here, but then some increases there, so it ended up staying the same. And at this point, with the season staying pretty much the same, like, we all know what we're doing. There's no wild changes for us all to, like, reset and start over. So play a bunch of good games, and then get ready for 4th edition coming in the summer. And as always, if you need any models, check us out at warpfireminis.com.